Pickleball Diaries presents Cling on the Court with your host, Lily Brown. Let's go!
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cling on the Court, cracking the pickleball code again. And Jeff, nice to see you again. How are you?
I'm doing great, Lily. How are you doing?
I'm amazing. I'm very excited about what we want to talk about today. We will talk about cracking the code of decision making. It's a big topic.
Yeah, it's an awesome topic because obviously decision making and shot selection is a huge part of playing pickleball well. Um, but it's a hard skill to master, and you may never actually master the art of decision making, but it is a really important aspect of becoming a complete pickleball player.
Yeah. Okay, let's give us some hope. Let's try to try to wishful thinking. We can get a good path of learning the decision making.
You can for sure.
So, can you describe like what does a good decision making really mean?
Well, good decision making or decision making in general just means selecting the optimal shot or what you think might be the optimal shot for a given situation. And if we talk about what exactly is good decision making, well, if we make good decisions, we make the correct decision. So, meaning we've chosen a shot that is, maybe high percentage, but also the most effective shot. So it's always a balance between like, how do we find the shot that's going to be the most effective and make life tough for opponents without taking too much risk, right? So that's why we say things like attacking at the right time or wait for the right ball to be aggressive, things like that. Those are examples of decision making. So good decision making means choosing what we think is the optimal shot for a situation and also making that decision quickly, right? So those are the two elements of good decision making is make the optimal choice and make it early because the earlier we know what we're going to do, the easier it is to execute it with consistency and effectiveness.
Yeah. And actually, can I adding one point from my observation? So because with different level of players and they carry different skill set and your capability is different. So should the decision making on your game is based on your own skill set. And I do find like everybody, a lot of players are learning directly from YouTube nowadays.
Mhm.
There was all these like fancy shots. And but like if you don't in your skill set don't have certain shot, even though it's the right decision making for these pros, but not maybe the right one for you. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a really good point that you've brought up. And so I guess to preface my answer, there's so many things that go into making a decision on every shot. Like there's a ton of variables because pickleball is a game with all
Yeah.
these different shots. So there's, your own strengths and weaknesses and abilities highly influence your decision of what shot you're going to hit, right? Then there's the ball that you receive also highly influences what shot you might hit. If the ball is really low, maybe it doesn't make sense to attack or it becomes risky to do so. If the ball's high, maybe that's the right time to be more offensive. So there's the ball, then there's your opponent's strengths and weaknesses, like you might choose to hit to one opponent versus the other. Um, and then there's other factors like external factors like sun, wind, the type of ball you're playing with. So all that to say, though, is there's a lot of variables that influence decision making, and your own strengths and weaknesses or your own abilities highly influence what shots you might hit. So you might see the pros speeding up a forehand from the kitchen off the bounce, even if it looks like it's pretty low, because maybe they have the tools to do that, and they also have the countering skills to follow up a speed up with a great counter after their opponent counters their speed up. But if we don't have the skills to execute a speed up off the bounce with our forehand from the kitchen, we probably shouldn't do it because we're either going to be inconsistent or we're going to lack the quality to be effective with that shot. So yeah, understanding your own strengths and weaknesses and how that influences decision making or game plans is really important. So that's a good point that you brought up.
Yeah, thank you. Because I find with my own learning journey past, my own decision-making process is constantly changing, progressing, and based on what I have and at that stage.
Mhm.
And it's a very exciting kind of different learning path from learning each individual techniques and skills and shots.
Yeah, that's another good point is sort of recognizing where you're at with your current level and how your level stacks up against opponents of a fairly similar level, or it's like, okay, opponents at the next stage of competition, what shots do I need? Because maybe right now you can't hit certain shots, so it's not advisable to do so because you don't possess the competency to execute a given shot. But that shot might be needed at a higher level of play. So maybe it's what would be considered a bit of a risky shot right now. And if you try to attempt it, you'll miss a lot because you don't possess the skill. Recognizing things like that and then going and training certain skills to add to your toolbox so that you can implement those in competition is really important. But that's why it's important to know your own strengths and weaknesses and sort of have a good idea of like your own skill set, so that you can, set your game plans accordingly and, make shot selection that's based on your current level of play.
Huh. Okay, we will revisit this topic and this point later in the episode about how to design a progressive learning
Mhm.
method. So, and I also want to ask you, the next question is, how do you distinguish between reactive instincts and the strategic thinking on the court?
I love this question, because sometimes yeah, it's really good. I'm going to hopefully give a good nugget here that I think can be really helpful to people. So when we talk about decision making, like sometimes, people will not fight against the idea there, but they'll be like, well, we can't just be consciously making decisions every single shot. Like, how are we going to be focused and stay in sort of like the zone or the flow state? And in an ideal world, we get to a stage where decision making happens unconsciously or subconsciously so that our reactions and shot selections become automatic. Like that's the goal for all skills, right? Is that we're all working towards making most of our skills hopefully more automatic, where we don't feel like we're thinking. So even when when we are in our flow state and we feel like we're not really thinking, at some point we trained enough to make our responses automatic. So like there's always a reason we hit one shot versus another. So you're like, oh, I don't know. I didn't even feel like I made a decision. Well, it's like, yes, that's true. But at some point you probably had to focus on the response and making it automatic. But there's always a reason you hit one shot instead of other shots, right? It's just that if we're really good at decision making, it becomes unconscious or subconscious and automatic. So here's the nugget I'm going to give people and yourself is if you understand the stages of learning, it'll help you understand how important decision making is, but also hopefully provide you with insight into what stage of learning or development you're at with particular shots, and hopefully also allow you to be patient with yourself when you're training these skills. So there's 4 stages to learning. I learned this a long time ago, but for me, it was really helpful. Is the first stage of learning is you're unconsciously incompetent, meaning you don't possess a skill, but you don't even know that you don't possess the skill. So like a new pickleball player, they don't even know what skills they need to play the game, right? Until a coach or someone informs them like, hey, you need to hit this type of shot. And they're like, oh, okay. They don't have the shot. So now they're aware of it. But before they weren't even aware. So they were unconsciously, which means like they didn't know or they weren't thinking about it. They were unconsciously incompetent. They didn't possess that skill. The next stage of learning is you're consciously incompetent. So you're aware that there's a particular shot you need,
Yeah.
but you don't have it. So you're not competent at the shot. So you're consciously incompetent. You're aware that you don't have the skill. The next stage of learning, the third stage, is you're consciously competent. So when you really focus in on a skill and you're thinking about that skill, let's just say it's a backhand topspin dink. So a two-handed roll dink. When you're really thinking about how to do it, you can do it. but you really have to focus on it to make sure you have the correct paddle angle and the correct swing path. So that's an example of being consciously competent. The next stage is to be unconsciously competent, meaning you don't even have to think about whatever skill or shot that you're hitting, you just have it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're all working towards. Now, we may never get there because it's a very like lofty goal, but most of us, like we're always working on being like a lot of us, if we're sort of been playing for a while, are somewhere between like consciously competent and unconsciously competent. So like there's a lot of shots that we don't even have to think about anymore. Like we're pretty darn good at them. And most of the time we execute without even having to be too aware of like exactly what we're doing. We just have that skill. It's automatic. But a lot of shots we're still having to really focus on maybe particular things to be competent at it. So if you understand those four stages, that's how where the decision making training comes in is most of us need to train decision making where we're consciously working on what the right decision or optimal decision is. And we do that enough that it becomes automatic. And that's where we become unconsciously competent. So we have the skill and we don't even need to think about it. But with decision making, we often need to train it. We have to train it first consciously, being aware of the variables that affect decision making and train it enough to where it becomes automatic.
Yeah, thank you. I think you mentioned of these stages to me in the past. And like one thing I find I'm doing right now is when I'm working on a new shot, but often there is a learning curve.
Mhm.
There's an in-between place. In-between place is so frustrating. And I just want to encourage all the listeners and audience when you at in-between place, but when you recognize, at least you know what you're doing wrong, it's a progress. Don't get overly frustrated about that because you are already one step further improved than your previous stage, and at least you know what you're doing wrong.
Exactly. So you're
Often I say to myself, like, before I hit the wrong shot, and I said, oh, unlucky, or my partner will say unlucky. Now I recognize, no, it's not unlucky, it's wrong. And I will say to myself, don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah. And again, that's a great example is if you know where you're at with a certain skill or a
Yeah.
phase of development with a certain skill or just in general with your own game, it allows you to maybe hopefully be more patient with yourself during the development process at all levels of play or development. So if when you understand the stages of learning, you're like, oh, okay, right now I'm somewhere between, consciously incompetent. So I know I don't have the skill, but and I'm somewhere between that and being consciously competent. When I think about it, it's really starting to happen. And then if you keep working on it, you'll become unconsciously competent or automatic. And just understanding those stages of learning may help you be more patient with yourself, give yourself a little more grace when you're training so that you don't become impatient with the learning process or frustrated with the learning process.
Yeah, thank you. So, and I think you talked about the decision making. I think in the past we talked about the 4R. I
Mhm.
think the decision making is very much linked to the anticipation, right? Like with the whole shop cycle.
Yeah, so just as a reminder for people that it maybe didn't see that episode with the shot cycle, is the first stage of the shot cycle is reading the ball. So you have to read the situation and then you react, then you respond. So in order to respond with the like optimal decision or optimal shot selection, you have to be really good at reading and reacting to the ball, which is, reading and reacting is sort of a combination of anticipation and perception. They're slightly different things, but they're kind of similar. But the main point is you have to have good perception skills. So reading the oncoming ball and reading the situation to inform your desired shot or what you think is the optimal shot for that situation. And again, that sounds complicated. It's like, well, how can we think about what shot we're going to hit every single time? And it's like, well, we want it to become automatic, right? And if
Yeah.
we develop good perception skills, so the ability to read the ball usually that leads to better decision making and quicker decision making. And it usually also leads to more automatic decision making. So that's the goal. But again, it's good that you brought that up. The reading and anticipation and the perception is super important on every shot. We've talked about the shot cycle, but there's also like every shot you hit, you perceive, decide on a shot, you execute the shot, and then there's feedback. Feedback just means you observe what happened, and it's like, okay, that shot was effective, or oh, I missed that shot, I need to do something different. And then that whole loop starts again. It's perception, decision, execution. And then after the execution, you're just seeing what happens. And that can happen super, super fast, which is why we need to train hard, train enough, and train smart, or train with specificity or intention, right?
Yeah, nice. So can you illustrate more about the decision-making chain and including the movement, the mechanics, the mindset, just kind of help us to give a bit more step-by-step guide of
Mhm.
decision-making.
Yeah, you can see decision making is connected to a lot of things, right? So, or a lot of other skills. So you mentioned movement. So just picture yourself, I don't know, let's say you've hit an aggressive serve and the return comes short and weak and low. And let's say you don't have good perception skills or good ball judgment skills. So you don't really read the ball really well, or you haven't trained your perception skills or even your decision making skills. So you've just hit an aggressive serve. The return comes back kind of weak and short. In theory, that should be a great ball to move forward, take a little bit earlier, and like increase the tempo and speed of the shot to challenge the other team when they are at the non-volley zone. But if you have poor perception skills or poor movement skills, you may not read that that ball is short, and you may arrive to the ball a little bit slower or later, and now your impact point is lower. So you have to hit up on the ball, or you're not optimally set up for the ball in terms of your reception skills. And now that's going to limit your ability to hit an effective, aggressive shot. When in reality, if you had those skills, you could capitalize on that weak short return by moving forward quickly, making a decision quickly that you're going to take the ball closer to the peak of the bounce and drive it with more speed at a more level trajectory. But if you don't have good perception skills or good ball judgment skills, and you arrive late to the ball, your contact point is low, you now may be forced to play a more defensive shot, and now you've lost your advantage and you've lost the ability to pressure your opponents, right? So good perception skills and good ball judgment skills combined with good movement or footwork allows you to capitalize and make potentially more effective shots, right? So perception and movement skills give you basically broaden your horizons or broaden the potential spectrum of shots you might be able to hit. So, and that's why obviously the more athletic we are and the better we react or anticipate or perceive the oncoming ball, the more shots we might be able to hit that allow us to put pressure on our opponents. So, anyways, all that to say, like perception skills and movement skills are highly connected to decision making. And and we should always sort of be thinking like that, like in what ways can I cause trouble for my opponents? In which ways can I create trouble and pressure them, either with precision or by taking away time or increasing the speed of the ball? And if we don't have good ball judgment skills or decision making skills, we might miss some opportunities to do that. And then we've lost our advantage. And if our opponents do that better than us, they're going to pressure us before we can pressure them. So, and on the flip side of that, also recognizing when our opponents have hit a really good shot, that even with our best reaction and our best footwork puts us in a defensive position where we're really stretched, we're off balance a little bit, recognizing like, hey, I'm not in a good position to go for anything crazy here or really aggressive. I've got to just like play soft and slow and just survive and keep the ball in play and then try and recover and hopefully get into a better position on the next point, or sorry, the next shot.
Yeah.
So those are examples of decision making and how other elements influence decision making.
Yeah. I like to give you real scenario question when you just talk about if you they return short, you return short, and you anticipate, okay, your opponent is ready to charge, they're gonna drive aggressive. So on your side, so do you actually charge to the kitchen and ready to block, or stay more at midcourt? I find with this scenario, like a lot of people, a lot of players, they have their different ways of handling it. So I want to hear your take on this.
Yeah, great point. And it goes back to your original or one of your other questions from earlier is you have to know your own strengths and weaknesses. So, even if I return short, I still probably want to get into the non-volley zone because I'm pretty confident I have the countering skills that even if my return was short, the serving team and whoever's going to drive their third shot, if they choose to do so, I'm still confident enough that I can counter. And I don't want to stay back because that's going to make it even easier for them to pressure me. I'm now in even more of a defensive position where they can get the ball at my feet. I can't take away time. And now they've gained the upper hand. So me knowing my own skill set, I'm still going to go forward, but I'm going to hopefully have the perception skills to read and perceive that I just sent a weak ball and it's going to come back fast, most likely. So I'm going to really ready myself psychologically, but also I'm going to ready myself tactically to get ready to counter before they even strike the ball. If they don't speed the ball up and drive it, great, I have more time. But if they do, I have the perception skills to recognize that that's a likely shot from them, and I'll be ready to counter. If you're a little bit lower level or you haven't developed your countering skills when someone drives the ball from close range, maybe you stay back at the baseline, throw up a lob when they drive the ball to you, or try to hit a drop reset or some sort of neutralizing defensive shot. But again, that's a factor in decision making is your own abilities. And you have to know, like, okay, should that's an example of decision making in terms of positioning. Do I go all the way to the non-volley zone or do I stay back? And that's an individual choice based on individual strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, I really like your answer. Like it's like really amazing. It's not, your decision making is not really based on textbook. Okay, so that's the ball you should stay back or the ball you should go. It's really based on what you can handle. Um, and so especially with, like, if we have some senior players, you have issue of running fast to the kitchen. And we do have some lob master in our club. And she literally can stay anywhere, just put a paddle there, whatever smash you give to her, she just put a paddle there and just lob. And that's her strength. And
Yeah.
she doesn't need to charge to the kitchen to counter, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And because maybe, again, in this example, maybe doesn't have the physical skills or ability, I should say, to get forward quickly. So it may benefit her to stay back and throw up the lob. And again, that's a player who seems to be aware of their own abilities and strengths and weaknesses, and then using those abilities to their benefit or to the best of their ability. So they've chosen a way to play that gives them the best chance of winning based on their own skill set.
Yeah. But for the upcoming young players, if you can move, make the right decision and learn the skill you need to learn. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, like when we talk about this, and can you give us the real-time tactics and for example, for the shot selection and then the pattern reading, and if we say, assuming like we should learn the proper footwork, we should learn the proper way of counter or addressing the ball. And can you walk us through a scenario, a point, what will be the proper reaction and decision making we should have?
Yeah. So there's different, yeah, in all games. So first of all, like pickleball, it's a game full of different shots and tactics and variables, which is why it's so important to train in a way where you're training sort of situation and tactics, right? And yes, you need the technical skills to implement or execute a variety of shots, but we should always, I think, try to be thinking in like a game-based way or a tactical way, because the tactics always come before technique. You don't know how you're going to do something unless you know what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah.
So that being said, there's a whole bunch of common game situations where we can train basic decision making, right? So for instance, return of serve, that's something that's how every point starts, is you have a decision like where you might send the ball, like which opponent you want to send it to, or how you're going to hit it. So a good basic example of decision making on the return would be, okay, if the ball comes fast and deep from the server, you may choose to hit a safer return where you focus more on height and hitting at a moderate speed to get the ball deep. Because if you try and hit really aggressive on a fast serve, it can sometimes be hard to control the ball and it becomes more risky. So we do generally want to return deep as often as possible, most of the time. So the way in which we choose to send the ball might differ based on the quality or type of serve that we're receiving. So if the serve is really fast and deep, we may go less risky and focus on height at a moderate speed to achieve our deep return and give us time to get to the net. The opposite of that would be if we're playing someone who sends us a weak serve. So it's slow, it kind of sits up for us and it allows us to move forward. Our decision on that ball should probably be to move forward quickly, take away time by getting the ball at the peak of the bounce before it declines so that we can take it earlier, which gives our opponents less time because we're shrinking the space between us. And we may choose to speed that return up, hit it more level over the net to pressure the serving team with a more aggressive return. So that's a really simple example of decision making on the return of serve. Other decision making might be, okay, we've arrived at the non-volley zone after that return, and now the opponents are going to hit some sort of third shot, and we're going to be hitting a fourth shot. So what type of fourth shot might we hit? Well, if they drive the ball really aggressive at us, we may just want to try and block the ball back and just focus on keeping our block counter low over the net. So we don't even care where it goes. We just want to keep it low so that it doesn't get popped up and attacked on the next ball. Or we may recognize, okay, it's a fast drive. The server actually is staying back. We may want to hit a soft angle volley to the front part of the court to make them have to stretch and move forward. Okay, that's another example, but we have to recognize what ball's coming at us and what are the potential responses we could have. They might hit like a third shot drop, and it's an effective third shot drop. So it comes really dipping at our feet. Well, probably makes sense to recognize that and try and hit like a soft cross court dink or drop ourselves. Because if we try any other shot, it becomes risky if the ball's at our feet. And making those decisions quickly. Then there's some gray area. There's always potential for gray area when it comes to decision making. Maybe they hit a hybrid, so it's like a top spin sort of half drive, half draw, and maybe that ball is just below the height of the net. Okay, we have the choice. We might be able to sort of hit like a speed up roll shot, especially if the server or the person who hit the third shot is staying back. Maybe we can hit more of a roll to the open court to keep them back. Or maybe we could hit short and we could hit like a soft drop to make them run forward. And so again, we have a choice to make based on the ball received and based on our own abilities. If we don't have a good roll on our fourth shot, we probably shouldn't attempt it. We should probably develop it and work on it in practice. But if we don't have it in a game, it might make more sense to respond with a short drop because that's a shot that we have. Anyways, those are a couple of examples of decision making, mostly based on your court positioning, the ball received, and the qualities of the ball received. So like the speed, height, spin, direction, those things all influence decision making. And the position of your opponents influences your decision making, right? You may choose to hit deep if they're already back, or you could hit short if they're back to draw them in or make it tough for them and make them stretch. So those are some examples of decision making in a couple of common situations. If you want me to add more, I can, but
Yes, definitely. So I'm just gonna recap a bit just from what you said, and then I think I have an onslaught of questions for you just based on you talked about decision making, and I find with decision making, like what shall we choose, and we like we should adjust, we should more than just choose looking at the ball saying, oh, this is a right shot to the ball. We also should factor in who our opponents are, what's their weakness. And our decision should be also factor in, we should hit to their weakness. So, and then the reason why I mentioned that, because there's like two scenarios, which is we practice for tournament or we just having rec game for fun. And I find often when we execute a hit a shot in rec game, we don't really overthinking who our opponents are, the weakness are. We just, for example, if it's kind of high ball, like we just want to smash it, just want to put it away. But in the tournament play, when you face a very strong player and then they can have very good defense, like, and you're facing a different kind of counter coming back. So my question here is, in the rec play, do we also practice our decision making and not just on the shot, but based on whoever we play against and hit into their uncomfortable zone? But it might not be like, say, if it is really a put away, you can put away, but do I choose to really go the angle? So because we know we cannot move, they cannot move there with the wing angle, it's done. So like I hope I explained my question clearly. It's more like training. How do we train ourselves for the decision making?
Yeah. So you've just stated a variety of variables, right? So, and this is the challenge with playing high level pickleball or playing pickleball at the best level you can play at, is because there's so many variables that it makes it tough, right? Like we could always choose to play a really safe shot because, maybe we don't want to take risk or we don't have aggressive shots. Well, we can always play the safe shot. But if we're playing against players who are competent, they're going to make us pay if we hit a shot that's not really that effective. So you've just listed a whole bunch of variables that influence decision making. And this is exactly why you need to train situations, not technique on its own, is you need to train specific situations and be really clear about what is the situation that you're training and what are the correct tactics for the situation. And then, yes, you need to develop the technical skills to implement whatever shots are needed in this situation or a specific situation, right? So you just described mostly the positioning of your opponents or the abilities of your opponents and how that might influence what shot you hit, right? And so you use the example of rec versus competitive play. So shots that you get away with in rec, maybe with a specific group of players, maybe you've gotten away with, speeding up the middle with your forehand from the kitchen when you're playing the left side, and you're really good at it, and you can fool the players you're playing against, and you send that ball through the middle and they never get it back, or they always pop it up. And then you try that in a tournament with two players on the other side who are amazing at countering. They have great anticipation skills. You find out quickly, oh, that's not the optimal shot against this particular team. And that's an example of how the strengths and weaknesses of your opponents influence decision making or influence your game plan and tactics that you might use against a particular team. But again, that's why it's important to think of pickleball in terms of tactics and situations, because, yes, technique is critical. Good technique is critical, but we also have to train situations so that we become smart players who know how to choose the optimal shot for a given situation and recognize strengths and weaknesses and be perceptive of what our opponents can do and be perceptive of where our opponents are. There's some players I've played against that are amazing at shake and baking. So after the drive, their partner like really crowds the middle and takes away space and takes away time. And if you don't hit a really crisp counter volley away from that partner, they're going to come across the middle and like take the ball out of the air and really pressure you. So, in rec games, maybe I've gotten away with sort of like, lightly volleying the ball sort of like casually to the open space, but against certain players that are really skilled and they've worked on that pattern of poaching after a drive from their partner, you may have to change your tactic or change the type of shot you hit.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great example, but again, these are why we need to train situations and be aware of different tactics and situations. Because if we don't train that way, we're going to find ourselves in real competitive settings where we don't have the right response when we come up against particular opponents.
Thank you. So thank you again, Jeff. I cannot believe we're running out of time again. And then we will definitely continue this very intriguing topic. And and at the same time, listeners out there, please subscribe and follow our YouTube channel and our podcast on different platforms on Spotify, Google, Apple. So yeah, so we'll definitely see you very soon, and let's continue this topic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lily. Thank
Yeah,
you.
don't forget to hit the like button too. Thanks.